safeguard against election sabotage and partisan gerrymandering, limit the influence of dark money in politics so that billionaires and corporations cannot buy elections. Protecting our democracy should not be partisan. It should be a moral and civic imperative for every one of us. As a former United States Senator from New Mexico said, the late Dennis Chavez, who served in this chamber for 27 years until his passing in 1962, said, either we are all free or we fail. Democracy belongs to all of us. Now, our democracy faces clear and present dangers posed by Republican-led state legislatures across the country. Some lawmakers want to curtail the right to vote. Not for all Americans, but for the most vulnerable and historically disenfranchised. And if we think it's bad now, with what's happened in these state legislatures over the last few months, it's about to get a lot worse. History will not look kindly on inaction at this critical moment, and we must show the American people that we will not flinch when faced with the choice to protect our democracy and let it crumble before our eyes. There's a pattern of rampant discrimination that is disenfranchising countless black and brown voters across this country. Now, in 2005, Jesus Gonzalez became a naturalized citizen. On the same day, he swore an oath to the United States. He sought to register to vote in Arizona. He was rejected. So he tried again after he obtained the license. But again, he was rejected. It was then that Mr. Gonzalez, a school janitor, sued the state. His case made its way to the Supreme Court, who in 2013 ruled in his favor and struck down Arizona's law. Mr. Gonzalez was one of 31,000 voters in Arizona affected by such a discriminatory law. Just this past September, the Mexican-American Legal Defense Fund joined other civil rights organizations in suing Texas over its discriminatory voting legislation known as SB 1. And we've heard a lot about it today. Among other things, SB 1 seeks to curb the assistance available to limited English proficient voters. And in 2006, MALDEF successfully sued Texas after the state legislature sought to dilute the Latino vote. In that case, Lulac versus Perry, the Supreme Court found that Texas violated the Voting Rights Act by denying Latinos the ability to elect a candidate of their choosing. 2017, MALDEF again sued in Texas after the city of Pasadena sought to weaken the Latino vote by changing the way city elected city council members. These are just some of the chapters of a long history of voter suppression. Now, we also know that voter suppression of Native Americans is real, and it's intentional. Until 2020, North Dakota voter ID laws required a residential street address. Now, that may sound like common sense to some folks, but for those of us that live in rural communities and for my brothers and sisters that live in Native American communities, we all grew up with rural route boxes. My address growing up was Route 1, Box 102. Not because I didn't want a street address named after my grandparents like it is today. That was the address. Now, because of that law in North Dakota, many Native Americans like Richard Brakebill, who was a Navy veteran, had been denied the right to vote because of an expired driver's license and a tribal ID that, get this, did not have a current residential address. It had the post office box that was his address. In 2020, the candidacy of Joseph Dedman for county sheriff, a member of the Navajo Nation, was challenged in Arizona because he included post office boxes, which are often the only form of an address for rural Native American households. It's the only one they can obtain on his petition to office. 2020, Arizona's Pima County closed the early voting center in Pasquayaki lands and spent nearly $200,000 in legal fees rather than reinstate the voting center. South Dakota provided a fully funded polling place and early voting and registration opportunity to the 12 non-Native American residents in Gan Valley. But get this, they refused to provide the same services to the 1,200 plus residents in Fort Thompson on Crow Creek tribal lands. In 2021, Kimberly Dillon, a citizen of Rosebud Sioux, she joined the Oglala and Rosebud Sioux tribes in suing South Dakota for requiring voters to register at state agencies and DMVs, which were hours away from tribal lands. They were making it harder for people to even get registered to vote by saying, drive 3 and 4 hours away. Those are tough roads to drive on. Many Native Americans like Kimberly went to great lengths to submit their voter registration applications to those state agencies, but the agencies never sent them to the local election offices, even after they traversed and got that job done and making that journey. They just want to submit them to let them get registered to vote. As a result, her right to vote in the 2020 presidential election was taken away. Kimberly asked, and I quote, "How many other people face this violation of our basic freedom to vote? We cannot allow voter suppression to continue in South Dakota or anywhere in Native America." These are American citizens whose rights were taken away from them for partisan advantage. Jesus and Kimberly's voices were taken away from them, just like countless other Americans who face the same discrimination. 19 states have passed 34 laws making it easier to sabotage election law and target voters of color. And not all of them had a supermajority or 2/3 vote. In 2016, Representative David Lewis, a Republican state lawmaker in North Carolina and member of the General Assembly's Redistricting Committee, said, and I quote, "I propose that we draw the maps to give a partisan advantage to 10 Republicans and 3 Democrat representatives, because I do not believe it's possible to draw a map with 11 Republicans and 2 Democrats." This is not new. This has been going on decade after decade. The only thing that's different now is in 2013, when the Supreme Court gutted the enforcement provisions of the Voting Rights Act, Republican-led legislatures don't have to hide behind it any longer. Now they just say they're going to draw for partisan advantage. They're going to change the rules to keep certain communities from voting, making it harder for people to get to that ballot box. This is nothing new. And shame on all of us for not acting when the Supreme Court told us this in 2013. That's on all of us. But we're here today. We're also seeing an uptick in violence as a result of the lies across the country. The big lie. The Department of Homeland Security has seen an increase in calls for violence as a result of these baseless claims of fraud in the 2020 election. We're losing honest election officials and poll workers because of threats against their lives due to conspiracy theories and lies pushed by the former president. The Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act will protect the vote of working families across the country. And only one archaic parliamentary measure prohibits all this progress. The filibuster does not increase deliberation in this chamber. It does not incentivize compromise. So while some claim that amending the filibuster will further the country's division,
right now,
I disagree. Right now, it's only aiding and abetting obstructionists and opponents of progress when it comes to voting on civil rights legislation. While the filibuster is not mentioned a single time in the Constitution, it is too...
Interruption. Thank you. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the cloture vote on the motion to concur be at 8 p.m.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Thank you. I appreciate the courtesy of my colleague.
Senator from New Mexico.
We had no choice but to do it at 6:30.
So the importance of us being here today goes right in the face of having this conversation and have debate. And I appreciate my Republican colleagues who've come to the floor to engage in some debate and some colloquy. I, like Senator Kaine, came to the Senate a bit naive. I thought debate happened here all the time. I came here thinking that I could offer an amendment at any time, that I could offer a unanimous consent at any time. It's not the case. This is not the Senate that our founders envisioned. Now, if you feel moved to oppose a piece of legislation, if you're passionate about an issue, you should have the courage to come to the Senate floor in front of your colleagues and the American people. You should not be allowed to phone it in from behind closed doors. This chamber has changed, just as the times have changed. So it's the responsibility of every one of us to make sure that the Senate works better. Not for us, but for the American people. Now, in closing, in 1805, Vice President Aaron Burr suggested that the Senate remove from its rules the previous question motion, which allowed the chamber's simple majority to end debate on a bill. He viewed the rule as completely unnecessary and urged the Senate to clean up its rule book because after everyone spoke and debated, they'd vote. A year later, the Senate removed the previous question motion, leaving a loophole that allowed the minority to take advantage and use what we now know as the filibuster. Unfortunately, Burr could not foresee the obstructionism of decades to come. In the following decades, pro-slavery senators co-opted the filibuster to protect the interests of white Southern enslavers. Men such as John Calhoun abused the filibuster to obstruct civil rights efforts. And according to historians, between 1917 and 1994, 30 measures favored by the sitting president, simple majorities in the House and Senate, half of which addressed civil rights, they all died, thanks to the filibuster. The same procedural tool proved to be even more useful to Southern senators who sought to block civil rights legislation, including anti-lynching bills. Not until '64 did the Senate successfully overcome a filibuster to pass important civil rights legislation and subsequent voting rights legislation. Now, history should act as a teacher to all of us, and history will remind us who voted today on the side of the people. I'm proud that this effort includes my Native American Voting Rights Act, which will ensure tribes and Native Americans and Alaska Natives and voters on tribal lands will have equal access to the electoral process. Access to the ballot box is the cornerstone of our democratic system. And without equitable access to it, we cannot stand on the world stage and claim that we are all leaders in the fight for liberty and justice for all. Now, my Republican colleagues have proven time and again that they're not interested in acting on this issue. Washington Republicans have made the political calculation that they have a partisan advantage here. They are too comfortable shrugging their shoulders and sitting on the sidelines while states chip away at the right to vote. I know where I stand, Mr. President. All we are asking for today is the opportunity to vote on this critical piece of legislation after everyone here has said their piece. I urge my colleagues to do the right thing today, to do right by our democracy, and to send the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act to the President's desk. I thank you all, and I yield the floor.